Hi, so this is a video to show how I do this pattern. I posted this recently on one of my Facebook groups and folks were asking about it. Um, this pattern, I'm going to call it the lily flower pattern because sometimes it kind of looks like a little fleur-de-lis going on in there. But just to introduce it to you is to say that, like, depending on what you do with the pattern, you can get some very different looks. So like with this hat, I've used the white as a color throughout, but then my color B, or my second color, I kind of chose different colors here to mix up what that looks like. And then with this one, I didn't mix up the colors at all. It's just the same two colors over and over. So that gives it a little bit of a different look. And then with this hat, which is the one that got people kind of asking about the pattern, I'm using a solid color, solid black throughout. But then this other color that you see running through is a variegated, I believe it's called mulberry loops and threads. I think Michael sells it. But so it's two yarns, two different yarns, and one of them is variegated and one of them is just straight up a solid color. So this is a project that I'm currently working on with that pattern, that lily flower pattern. And you can see how it looks as it starts to come off the loom. I've got a white, and then I've got this variegated color going throughout, as you see in there. That's the other thing that's going through. And then this is kind of what it looks like on the inside. So if you're working this pattern and you're curious, it just makes these kind of rows right here. And so you'll see as you work it up that that's kind of what it looks like on the inside. And then the way you do this pattern, it's basically repeating 8 rows over and over again. And you start with your first color, which for me was the white, and you do 2 rounds of white, and then you'll use your second color and you'll do 2 rounds of the second color. You'll go back to the white for 2 more rounds, and then back to your second color for the final 2 rounds to make the total of 8. So I'm going to show how to do each of those 8 rounds so you can see how that works. It's basically using 3 different stitches, one of which is ewrap, one of which is a skipping behind the peg, so technically maybe not a stitch. And the third one is a stitch that I call the headphone stitch, which is kind of a variant on the tiny heart stitch, but I do something a little twist with it. So I'll show how this works, and I'll also show that headphone stitch because I think I kind of made that up. So what we'll do to start the first row is it starts with a row of headphone stitch, skip behind, headphone stitch, skip behind, and that's the whole row. And here's how you do that headphone stitch because I'm pretty sure I made this up. So you start with your working yarn and you come in front of the peg and you hold it there, and then working in the direction of where you're going to go, you're going to wrap it behind and come around the front again. And so now you've got like 3 loops on your loom peg there. And you're going to bring your hook underneath, come up, grab the top, and then flip it over. So if you've done the tiny heart stitch, that flip part is that's exactly what they do with theirs, only it's not, the first part that I did there where you wrap is not part of that stitch. So that's how you do it. I'm going to show it again. As part of the pattern, we'll skip behind this next peg. And then on peg 3, I'm going to do that headphone stitch again. So I'm going to hold the yarn, wrap it behind, come back to the front, and then bring my loom hook under both of these loops right here, and then flip this over. And you'll see the reason I call it headphone stitch is because these 2 little bumps on the side here make me think of headphones. That's why I'm calling it that. And so as you're working your first round for this pattern, you're going to just keep doing that stitch on all the odd pegs, so 1, 3, 5, and then on all the even pegs, you're skipping behind. So every other peg gets worked. And then I will show you how it works for the next round in a sec. So for the second round, we're going to do all ewraps wherever we put that headphone stitch. So as you see, when I finished up my first round, there's almost the second to last one I did. There's the last one that I did. I skipped behind, And now I'm starting my second round here on the one where I just did that headphone stitch. I'm going to ewrap every single one of those, and I'm going to skip behind again the pegs that I skipped behind before. So you're basically just working the same grouping of pegs on your first 2 rounds. And you'll be able to tell pretty easily where you need to work and where you want to skip, because it looks different. You know, obviously you skip behind is going to look different than your headphone stitch. So that's one of the things I like about this pattern, is that I kind of always know where I am just by looking at the loom. And so I'll finish up these and then I'll show you how round 3 goes. So I've just finished doing all my ewraps on top of all those headphone stitches. Here's my last stitch that I worked. And now I'm going to change colors. So I was using the white. Now I'm going to work on using this color. So what I will do, so that I can kind of secure it, and I think a lot of people do this when they change colors and they're going back and forth between colors, is you take your old yarn and you kind of want it to be on top of the new, so it gets a little bit secured that way. And so I'm going to do that. I'm going to just kind of make sure that my yarn is good to go in that way, and then I'll show you how this row goes. Let's see here. So what you do with the pattern is the stitches that you just worked, and you'll be able to tell looking behind like where you were. You're going to do with your color B, you're going to do the pegs that you didn't work for that first couple of rounds. So I just did all the odd pegs on this. Now I'm going to, with my second color, do all of the even pegs. And it's the same pattern. You do the headphone stitch on peg 2, and then you skip behind. You do the headphone stitch on peg 4, and then you skip behind. And you just keep going on the even pegs this time with your second color, working all the way around. And I'll show you row 4 next. So I just finished up the last of row 3, and you can probably guess that the next step is to ewrap all of these pegs that I just worked. So I'm going to ewrap peg 2 and skip behind peg 3, go to peg 4, ewrap that. Skip behind 5, go to 6, and ewrap that. And that's going to be your next row. Is row 4 is just ewrapping all of the headphone stitches that you just made with your second color. And that's kind of how this whole pattern really works. It's doing the headphone stitch and then ewrapping with, so you're doing 2 rows of each color to do that. And then it really comes down to when you change your color, like what peg you start at is kind of what makes this pattern sort of alternating the way it is. But I will show you how to do rows 5 through 8 coming up. So I just finished doing my ewraps on row 4 all the way through there. And for rows 5 through 8, you're basically going to change up where you start for each color. So before, when I started with the white, I started on peg 1 and I did all the odd pegs going around. Now I'm going to start on peg 2 and do all the even ones going around. And while you're working this pattern, if you're ever wondering where you need to be and you've kind of lost track, your color A is always going to be going on top of your color B. Like anytime you see color B, that's where you want to go with your color A. And then when you're working on color B, you can kind of look behind and see like what you had done and know that you need to move over. You're going to do the opposite of what you had just done with your white. But I'm going to show how those go anyway, and then I'll have also the pattern beneath like written out so you can see like exactly what I'm talking about. But just to show, this is row 5, so now instead of starting on peg 1, I'm starting on peg 2 with the white, and I'll do my headphone stitch here. Flip that, skip behind peg 3, headphone stitch on 4, and I'm just going to continue doing this for row 5, working all of the even pegs and skipping behind all of the odd. Okay, so I just finished my round 5 where I did the headphone stitch on every even peg with the white. And now, of course, I do my ewraps over the headphone stitch. So for every peg that I just worked with that headphone stitch, I'm going to ewrap them. And every peg that I skipped, I'm going to keep skipping behind that peg. And that's going to be your round 6. Okay, so I just finished my round 6 where I was ewrapping all of those white headphone stitches. And just to go back to something I said earlier, like if you're ever working the pattern and you're not really sure what you need to do next, like right now everything looks like it's color A. And if you're not sure where to go with your color B, you can always look behind and say, okay, well, I just did all of these pegs with the white, so I want to do all the pegs I skipped behind with that color B. And you're going to do that every time you use color B. It's going to be doing the pegs that you didn't use before. So I'll just show that real quick. So I just did all of the evens with white, so I'm going to do all the odds with my variegated color B here. So again, it's headphone stitch, and then flip that over, and then I skip behind peg 2, I do peg 3, headphone stitch, I skip behind 4, and that's going to be your whole round 7, is doing this with your variegated or your color B yarn. So I just finished row 7 where I was doing my headphone stitch on all the even pegs, odd pegs, not the even pegs, with my color B. This is my color B. So on all the odd pegs, just to clarify that. And now I'm going to do my final round, row 8, doing ewraps on top of each of these headphone stitches with my color B. So I'm going to wrap the first peg, skip behind second, wrap the third, skip behind the fourth and wrap the fifth, skip behind and wrap that one. And so you're going to do that the rest of the way around. And then when you're done with that, you're going to go back to that first row that we did, where you work your white on top, or your color A on top of that first peg, and just repeat those 8 rows again. So thank you for watching the video, and I hope you can find some fun things to do with this pattern. I really enjoy it. I've really enjoyed making all the different things that I've made so far with it. I have a lot of fun. I think it's a fun stitch to do. And I do want to give a quick shout out to the Loom knitting group that I'm in, because they're fantastic, very supportive. So thank you to those folks who were there, and have a lovely day.